Racism. Racism, the offspring of slavery, is a group-based wealth and power concept. It is a competitive relationship between groups of people for the ownership and control of wealth, power and resources. It is used by the wealthy and resource-holding group to enslave, marginalize, segregate, subordinate, dominate or exclude a weaker group. Racism is not synonymous with prejudice, bias, bigotry and discrimination and has, therefore, become one of the most misused words in the English language. In earlier times, humans practiced tribalism, which is different from racism. Racism never existed until the 1500s, when 9 European nations initiated a literal race to colonize the resources of the newly discovered Western world using slave labor and the material resources of Africa. Racism was built on economic development and remained an economic concept through the 16th and 17th centuries, when England, the world's biggest slave trading nation, introduced the King James Version of the Bible and encouraged the use of biblical scriptures to justify slavery. Racism acquired a religious foundation. During the early 1800s, pseudoscientists crafted evolutionary theories linking plants, animals, insects and humans in a descending order of development or evolution. Plants, animals and humans were ranked from the highest to the lowest. By 1859, slavery had maldistributed nearly 100% of the nation's wealth, power, resources and control of all levels of government into the hands of European whites. Black slaves owned and controlled nothing, with educated whites in control and impoverished and uneducated blacks on the bottom. Charles Darwin, in his Origin of the Species, proclaimed whites to be superior to blacks. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, the race was over. European whites had effectively obtained a monopoly of ownership and control. Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species promoted the belief that groups of human beings should be ranked by order based on biological characteristics. Racism then became biological. Naturally, Charles Darwin, as a Caucasian, placed those features that best matched his own at the top of the ranking order. Thus, the myth of superior white skin was born. To protect and preserve superior white skin and blood, public policies required racial identification on birth certificates and all public documents. The Black Civil Rights Movement ended race-based Jim Crow segregation and reduced racism to a personal attitude, but it did not redistribute the ownership and control of resources, wealth and power into the hands of black people. Racism went underground and re-emerged as conservatism, which maintains the status quo between blacks and whites. Racism is a derivative of the word race, a contest. Once the race between nations for economic wealth and power was over, the letter E was removed from the word race and the suffix ism was added. The suffix ism means to maintain the status quo, or prevailing conditions. Racism means doing whatever is necessary to maintain the wealth and power inequalities between blacks and whites as a result of slavery and Jim Crow segregation. In proportional and comparative terms, Black Americans are just as impoverished and powerless today as they were in 1860 when the race for ownership and control of wealth and power ended. Black Americans cannot be racist, and there is not one recorded instance in this nation's history where black people have used their collective wealth and power to segregate, subordinate, enslave and exclude other groups. In their present powerless and impoverished condition, Black Americans can only react to racism. Since whites, Asians, Arabs and Hispanics were slaveholders who benefited from slavery, they can legitimately be called racists, if and when they interfere with or oppose affirmative action, reparations or any other initiatives to eradicate the legacies of slavery from the shoulders of blacks. Claude Anderson, Dirty Little Secrets.